Hello everyone, welcome to these exciting Art House Urban Bright Arts and Education videos. Art House's mission is to inspire exploration and expression in the visual arts. We work with professional artists who will be instructing you on some amazing arts and crafts projects. Are you ready?
Hello everyone, my name is Emily Splain and I'm the Program Director here at Art House Inc. Today will be our first art history lesson. I am an undergrad in art history, and history has been a big part of why I chose arts and education. All right, so today we are going to be talking about Cubism. Cubism is a style of painting and sculpture developed in the early 20th century, characterized chiefly by an emphasis on formal structure, the reduction of natural forms to their geometrical equivalents, and the organization of the planes of a represented object independently of the representational requirements. This essentially means that Cubism is flat. The three-dimensional objects that we chiefly see in paintings are now flattened to make it less realistic, and geometrical means shapes. So you're looking at a face, and instead of drawing a face, you're drawing a circle or an oval. Cubism opened up almost infinite new possibilities for the treatment of visual reality in art, and was the starting point for many later abstract styles, including constructionism and neoplastism. By breaking objects and figures down into distinct areas or planes, the artist aimed to show different viewpoints at the same time and within the same space, and so suggest that they're three-dimensional form. In doing so, they also emphasized the two-dimensional flatness of the canvas. Instead of creating an illusion of depth, this marked a revolutionary break with the European tradition of creating the illusion of real space from a fixed viewpoint using devices such as linear perspective, which had dominated representation from the Renaissance onward. Think of famous paintings like the Mottola Fishes or The Last Supper, those realistic looking paintings. Those all came out of during the Renaissance. The first artist we're going to be looking at is Paul Cézanne, born 1839, died 1906, inspired generations of artists. Generally categorized as a post-impressionist, his unique method of building form with color, different points of view, and his analytical approach to nature influenced the art of Cubists. The painting his Bathers of 1874 demonstrates a developed style and tonal scale in one of his first paintings of this theme, which reoccurs in his works. The landscape of Bathers has the brilliance of plein air painting, or painting outdoors, while the figures, drawn from the artist's imagination, reconcile themselves within this setting. The complex process of drawing inspiration from these two sources, nature and memory, would occupy Cézanne in his later work. Cézanne's artistic evolution and mastery of this style of building forms completely from color and creating scenes with distorted perceptions of space, while the objects in his still life are rendered without use of light or shadow, but through extremely subtle gradations of color. Cézanne ignored the laws of classical perspective, allowing each object to be independent within the space of a picture, while the relationship of the one object to another takes precedence over traditional single-point perspectives. This means instead of looking at, let's say, a vase of flowers, you would look at each individual flower, pick them out of the vase, and move them across the canvas, rather than looking at the vase of flowers and painting said vase of flowers. Perhaps one of Paul Cézanne's most famed paintings, Ginger Jar, 1895, known in French as Le Vase Pale, is a still life masterpiece The background's lush hues of gray, blue, and red brushstrokes cleverly add depth to the painting and help bring the foreground, the table, and its color display of fruits, the viewer's main focus. The blurred tools on the back wall lead us to believe that the room is a kitchen. The artist's skillful curved brushstrokes in the bunched up white tablecloth create fabric folds and meticulous details that bring about a three-dimensional image. So vividly painted are the fruit that they appear palatable, plump, and delicious. Paul Cézanne cunningly achieved this effect by painting them slightly oversized, scattered untidily on the table. The summer fruit look like they have been spilled onto the cloth in preparation, perhaps for cutting and cooking. Although painted with much the same colors as the background, the ginger jar stands nonetheless tall and prominent against the clutter in front of it. The lid is missing, giving the impression that the ginger held inside might be utilized in the preparation of the fruit. Cézanne's masterful play on lighting, together with his use of short and intense brushstrokes twinned with white hues on the jar, render it an eye-catcher and an important item in the painting. The next artist we will be talking about is Georges Braque. Georges Braque, 1882 to 1963, was a French painter who was one of the important revolutionaries of the 20th century. Together with Pablo Picasso, he developed Cubism. His paintings consist primarily of still lifes that are remarkable for their robust construction, low-key color, harmonies, and serene meditative quality. Braque admired Cézanne, which provided much of an early tendency toward geometric forms. Braque emulated the older man's use of colorful tilted planes and his reduction of form to geometric shapes. Braque's work abstracted landscapes beyond the work of Cézanne, however. The slab volumes, sober coloring, and warped perspective in his paintings from this period are typical of the first part of what has been called the analytical phase of Cubism. Analytical Cubism from 1908 to 1912, our artworks look more severe and are made up of an interweaving of planes and lines and muted tones of blacks, grays, and ochres. Starting in 1911, Braque, now with Picasso, reached the high point of analytical cubism. The artist broke down planes and eliminated traditional perspectival space, which resulted in crowded canvases of subjects depicted so broken apart that they were nearly impossible to perceive. This formal breakdown of forms and space, coupled with a shockingly subdued palette, created a nearly abstract, difficult art unlike anything seen before in the history of painting. While many of the tendencies of analytical cubism veered towards abstraction, an equally powerful undercurrent utilized figurization. Mottola Fishes is one such painting. Done in 1910, this painting is very simplistic design in that the observer sees bottles and fishes that have been arranged onto a plate that sits on a table. These items are ordinary, everyday items that he transforms into the extraordinary. The items in the bottle and the fishes are made to appear unlike their usual form. It is as though the observer is looking at them through a prism, as they are distorted and fragmented. The imagery that we observe is blunt, yet beautiful in its arrangement. The muted colors work well with the heavily painted shape, and the overall feeling is that of contemplation. What is interesting is that Georges Braque used the subject of fish and bottles in many of his paintings throughout his career. Although the objects remain the same, the style in which he painted them changed, as he experimented with colors, textures, and ways of depicting them on the canvas. Bottle and Fishes is very much a Cubist painting and reflects his influence in having worked with the great Picasso. The earthy tones, fragmented objects, and the use of a horizontal plane all scream Cubism. However, what is interesting is that Braque distanced himself from Picasso. stating that unlike his mentor, his paintings had no social commentary attached to them, nor any great psychological meaning. Rather, his paintings were merely of a visual joy, intended for the observer to wonder at the use of composition, color, textile, choice, and use of space. What we find in the painting, Mottola Fishes, is symmetry, harmony, and the comfort of observing everyday objects. Last but not least, Pablo Picasso. Pablo Picasso was born in 1881 and died in 1973. He's probably the most famous Cubist artist. His prolific output included over 20,000 paintings, prints, drawings, sculptures, ceramics, theater sets, and costumes that convey myriad intellectual, political, social, and amorous messages. Picasso remains renowned for endlessly reinventing himself, switching between styles so radically different that his life's work seems to be a product of 5 or 6 great artists, rather than just the one. Of his penchant for style diversity, Picasso insisted that his varied work was not indicative of the radical shifts throughout his career, but rather of his dedication to objectively evaluating for each piece the form and technique best suited to achieve his desired effect. The influence of African and oceanic art is explicit in his masterpiece, Les Demoiselles of Advion, a painting that signals the nascent stages of Cubism. Here the figure arrangement recalls Cézanne's compositions of bathers, while stylistically it is influenced by primitivism, evident by the angular planes and well-defined contours that create an overall sculptural solidity in the figures. The artwork is uncomfortable to look at, but it's impossible to look away from. No other painting in the history of Western art so boldly and baldly confronted the viewer. 3 of the 5 naked protagonists stare outward, trapping us with their gazes, just as the picture's complicated space, populated by bodies that simultaneously press against and recede from its surface, draws us in. Pictorial conventions are banished and idealized notions of beauty jettisoned. The 2 rightmost figures, mask-like figures, are often connected to Picasso's visit midway through his work on the painting to the Musée Ethnographique du Trocadero in Paris, the city's first anthropological museum. There he had an encounter with African and oceanic art, which influenced the work's ferocious anti-naturalism, the degree to which the depicted figures resist mimetic norms. Picasso would continue using analytic cubism and continue to distort the forms until, like George Braque, they were indistinguishable. But later, around 1912 to 1914, synthetic cubism came about. It is considered the later phase and is characterized by simpler shapes and brighter colors. Synthetic cubist works are also often include collaged real elements such as newspapers. The inclusion of real objects directly in art was the start of one of the most important ideas in modern art. Works of this phase emphasize the combination or synthesis of forms in the picture. Color assumes a strong role in these works. Shapes, while remaining fragmented and flat, are larger and more decorative. Smooth and rough surfaces may be contrasted with one another, and frequently foreign materials such as newspapers or tobacco wrappers are pasted on the canvas in combination with painted areas. This technique, known as collage, further emphasizes the differences in texture and at the same time poses the question of what is reality and what is illusion. Picasso's work, Bottle and Wine Glass on a Table of 1912, is an early example of synthetic cubism, a paper collage in which he pasted newsprint and colored paper onto canvas. Picasso and Braque also include tactile components such as cloth, and sometimes used Trompe-l'œil effects to create the illusion of real objects and textures, such as a grain of wood. Cubism is a highly influential visual art style of the 20th century that was created principally by the artists Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque in Paris between 1907 and 1914. The Cubist style emphasized the flat, two-dimensional surface of the picture plane, rejecting the traditional techniques of perspective, foreshortening, modeling, and chiaroscuro, and refuting time-honored theories that art should imitate nature. Cubist painters were not bound to copying form, texture, color, and space. Instead, they presented a new reality in paintings that depicted radically fragmented objects. While Picasso and Braque are credited with creating this new visual language, it was adopted and further developed by many painters, including Marcel Duchamp, Jean Metzinger, Robert and Sonia Delaunay, and Juan Gris. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you learned a little bit about Cubism and the artists who created it. Don't forget to check out our videos that are doing art projects. Our next video will be discussing Picasso and earlier work before Cubism, the Blue Period. Can't wait to see what you say about this video. Thanks, and bye.
Thank you for listening to Art House's video today. Don't forget to like, share, and comment with what you've made. Tune in to another instruction video on our Facebook, Instagram, and our YouTube page. We are grateful to our funders and individual donors who have made this programming possible. We also wish to thank Lil Blizzard Boy from Refresh Collective for our background music. See you soon!